There is an investor that creates terror in boardrooms and in the minds of many CEOs. That man is Carl Icahn, often imitated but never matched in terms of profile and fear effect on corporations. Carl Icahn was born on the 16th of February 1936 in Brooklyn, New York, to a Jewish family of two schoolteachers. Carl went to Princeton and graduated in philosophy, and he then started medical school at New York University, but dropped out to join the army. And that's a bit similar to what Charlie Munger did. And we have a video on that on our channel, and do check it out. Carl Icahn started his career at mutual fund manager Dreyfus & Co. And he then moved on to be a stockbroker in the New York Stock Exchange, with his own arbitrage and options trading firm called Icahn & Co. Well, that was just when he was 32 years old, and things were very different back then, as you can imagine. It was easier to set up your own shop and compete with the big boys, without needing that much money. Now, if memory serves correctly, Carl Icahn started his brokerage with just $150,000 of his own money and $400,000 that he got from his uncle. Now, Carl Icahn became famous as a corporate raider back in the 1980s when he launched a takeover of TWA and stripped the company of some of its best assets to pay off the debt that it used to buy the company. And that ultimately led to TWA going bankrupt. Now, you may remember this inspired the characters of a few famous movies, and notably the figure of Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, who was plotting a takeover of an airline at some point in that movie. Now, what Carl was often doing was gaining a controlling stake in a target company and pushing for significant changes like divestiture, cost-cutting and such similar moves. Now, when Carl Icahn gets accused of pillaging companies he targets, he disputes that claim. And one of his known answers to that type of accusation is this one, which I find quite interesting. We're not about liquidating companies, but if you do that, why is that so terrible? We're not blowing up the factories. The person who buys it should be able to make the asset more productive. Carl Icahn also forced some of the firms he targeted to pay him to exit the stock, in what is technically called greenmail. So Carl Icahn belongs to a breed of brash and aggressive investors that used to be called corporate raiders, but have now slightly toned down the ways and have rebranded themselves or been rebranded as activist shareholders. Now, a few names of people who belong to this category of investors that have been very successful and have made a lot of money, rising to the pinnacle of the investment game, include names such as Bill Ackman of Pershing Square, Nelson Peltz of Trian, Ron Perlman, Paul Singer of Elliott, and a few others. Now, the way they operate is that they take an ownership stake in a company, which is sometimes pretty small, say 1%, but can go up much higher to 10% or even 30%, and then try to convince management teams to make changes to their business. Now, if that strategy fails, these activist shareholders will try to convince other shareholders to put pressure on the management team. And if things get really heated, they may end up trying to change the board of directors of those companies. It's all fairly complex, but these are all techniques that activist investors will use to gain influence on the companies they target, and to get them to do what they want to do. Now, do let me know in the comments below if you want some more details on this, or if we should make a video explaining the mechanics of how activist shareholders operate, and we'll definitely do that. We're always delighted to give you what you want to hear. And if you do like this video, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Carl Icahn has been very successful with his personal fortune amounting to more than $14 billion. In the course of his career, Icahn's targeted many leading US companies, including some of the following: Clorox, Occidental Petroleum, Apple, Netflix, Sandridge Energy, Herbalife, Hertz, eBay, Hologic, CVR Energy, just to name but a few. Now, Carl has often challenged the boards and management teams of these companies and asked them to do a series of things that they were not willing to do, and that in his mind would increase the value of those companies for the people who own the shares. Now, some of these activist campaigns, as they're technically called, ended up being successful for Carl Icahn, whereas others were significant failures and led to a lot of damage being made to the companies. And that's whilst Carl Icahn sold out of his position. Now, one of his big recent failures was Hertz, the car rental company, and that ended up going bankrupt when Carl Icahn owned close to 40% of it and ended up losing $1.6 billion when it went belly up. Now, to be fair, he's also had huge recent successes, including Netflix and his push to have PayPal spun out of eBay, which itself was a massively positive deal for shareholders. Now, in the course of these activist campaigns, Carl Icahn has often had some punchy sentences and tough words for some CEOs. A good example of that for you guys is discussing Vicki Hollub, the CEO of Occidental Petroleum, and the financing deal she agreed to with Warren Buffett. Yes, that guy. Now, our friend Warren Buffett, who we did a recent video on, and do check that out. But back to our point, Carl Icahn pretty much said that Warren Buffett, quote, took Vicki Hollub to the cleaners. And that's a good one. Now, we've added a few more at the end of this video, so you can check those out if you're curious. And they are pretty good. An interesting anecdote is that Carl Icahn is often seen wearing those shirts with a different coloured collar which scream, "I work on Wall Street," and I want to make sure all of you know about it. Now, another one is that there's another billionaire he really doesn't like. And that would be hedge fund superstar Bill Ackman. The two have feuded publicly numerous times, in public venues and over investments like Herbalife. And it appears that the hard feelings originate from a deal the two did back in 2004 that ended up in a lawsuit between the two, with Carl Icahn being forced by a court to pay $9 million to Bill Ackman, which he really didn't want to pay. Now, over the years, Carl Icahn has had very tough words for Bill Ackman. Like the following, for example: Bill Ackman is like a crybaby in the schoolyard. I went to a tough school in Queens, and they used to beat up the little Jewish boys. He was like one of the little Jewish boys crying. Ooh. On a personal level, Icahn married a Czech ballerina called Liba Trebal. Their marriage ended up in divorce, although they do have two children, Brett Icahn and Michelle Celia Icahn-Nevin. And Brett is the heir apparent for Carl Icahn and has taken a leadership role in his fund in recent months. Carl Icahn went on to marry his longtime assistant and former stockbroker Gail Golden. Now, Carl has also given a lot of money to charity. He's financed the building of a stadium named after him, founded charter schools in the Bronx, financed his alma mater, Princeton University, made a large contribution to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. In 2010, Carl joined the Giving Pledge like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and committed to giving away a substantial part of his fortune to charity. And that's it for now, folks, but don't miss the funny quotes which are coming up following soon. And just one thing I really want to ask you to do is to like this video. If you enjoyed it, do subscribe to our channel and comment below. Tell us what other videos you'd like to see and let us hear your thoughts. Thanks a lot in advance, and we'll see you all very soon. Some people get rich studying artificial intelligence. Me, I make money studying natural stupidity. CEOs are paid for doing a terrible job. If the system wasn't so messed up, guys like me wouldn't make this kind of money. We have bloated bureaucracies in corporate America. The root of the problem is the absence of real corporate democracy. In life and business, there are two cardinal sins. The first is to act precipitously without thought. The second is to not act at all. When most investors, including the pros, all agree on something, they're usually wrong. You learn in this business, if you want a friend, get a dog.